Deconverted Man here. A while back, somebody had said to me that I should believe in God. And I said, why? Why does it matter if I believe in this or not? In this semi lecture ish presentation, I'm going to go over some reasons that I think that we should be skeptical of God. And I'm going to start with some odd places, but please bear with me. This little fellow is a goblin. Goblins were created by human minds, as far as we know. They do not exist in our world. They exist only in the brain. They exist on paper in written format, exist in films or television shows, but always drawn or animated through CGI or perhaps a costume of some sort. And a goblin can look, well, a wide variety of ways, because what a goblin is really up to the whims of the people that make the goblin. If I was to write a book that says goblins don't exist, nobody would really care. If you were driving on the freeway and saw a sign that said goblins don't exist, you probably wouldn't really care about it. You'd probably just keep driving. If there was a play put on off Broadway where they said, goblins are dead, we killed them all, there are no more goblins today, so what? It wouldn't make headlines. It wouldn't be that big of a deal. This cute little guy is an ogre. Ogres don't exist. There's no such thing as ogres. If there was a building where people came together and celebrated the ogre, you might think that kind of strange. Maybe you thought, well, I mean, it's all in good fun. They're just, playing around. They're having this little party and fantasizing about ogres, and they're not really saying. And no, they're taking it seriously. Okay, they think that ogres actually exist. People would say that that's pretty strange, and I dare say people would think that those people were really weird. Ogres don't really exist. Oh, well, but we have writings about these ogres. You haven't come to our gathering, and you should check it out, because we'll explain it there. But honestly, if you thought about it, you can actually see ogres. They're everywhere. I don't see any ogres. Well, that's just because you haven't learned how to see them yet, but we'll explain it. Just come to one of our meetings. I don't think I want to go to one of your meetings. I'm kind of creeped out by now. Honestly, I don't want anything to do with ogres. They're not even really a thing in the first place. But why are you guys spending so much time and energy on it? That'd be kind of weird. But, of course, that sort of place, thankfully, isn't a thing. People don't gather together and pretend that ogres are real, and nor do they celebrate their writings about them. And nobody would care if I yelled into a megaphone that ogres don't exist. Here comes a dragon. Oh, a mighty dragon. Now, this is actually a Western dragon. You can tell that because Eastern dragons are like fluffier looking. This is like a Western dragon, and if I pull up an Eastern dragon, they look like more kind of fluffier and prettier, but Western dragons are like, "Roar, gonna get ya." Anyways, but a dragon is this construct that we have come up with. It's got, well, it doesn't have to have wings, but sometimes it has wings, but it's very big, and it's sort of lizardy like, and it's got scales, although it doesn't have to, and it may or may not breathe fire or ice or smoke, or, well, maybe it just roars really loudly and it eats things. And usually it has a tail and claws for its feet. And where the idea came from, who came up with it first, who knows? But there's absolutely, positively zero evidence of dragons. No archaeologist has ever found any bones that you could even try to put together. Well, I guess if you really tried, you could put it together, but you'd have to, chop them up and do some shenanigans to get a dragon, because the bones just don't do it. This is made up by humans for humans. But nobody's going to faint if on the side of a bus it says, "Dragons are dead. Just get over it already. Stop meditating to dragons. Your wishes will not be fulfilled by dragons." It'd be on different buses. It wouldn't all be on the same bus necessarily. I guess it's a big enough bus. It could all be on there. But nobody would care. So what? Nobody really believes that dragons are really real. And okay, maybe some nitwit out there believes that. Some Looney Tune person believes that dragons are real. But we all know that person's nuts. Yet, if you put the first letter of all of these three creatures, goblins, ogres, dragons, G-O-D, and you say there is no God, well, people lose their minds. People get angry, irritated, upset. They will insult you. They will sometimes try or actually kill you in some places. The idea that there isn't a God frightens the bleep out of many. Nobody cares about goblins, ogres, or dragons, but they care very much about G-O-D. Why? Well, it's complicated, but it's kind of simple. It's complicated because it's part of our shared history, and so it goes on back quite some time. As we evolved more developed brains, our systems of pattern recognition evolved with us, and we soon came to understand at some level mortality. And we came to understand that there was something that we needed to do with the bodies, perhaps because they could cause us problems, but perhaps also because we mourned their loss, because for the first time we recognized that that person was gone. And we recognized that we too would be gone. And so we started to bury people. More and more elaborate ceremonies became part of human culture. As humans split up into different areas of the world, different people came up with different ideas, different thoughts about how to bury the dead, how to have a ceremony about death. But death wasn't the only thing. Life, too, was celebrated. Life was seen as good, prosperous, and a blessing. Life was well received. It was good when people were born. Other rituals came into play as humanity developed. We desired to have control over the elements. Rain and non-rain were of huge concern to the early agricultural people. And before that, rain could also be trouble for a hunt. And forget about that, you wanted to have a good hunt, so you would draw the thing that you wanted to hunt so that you would gain control over it. It's magical spell in essence. You were asking that you would be granted control over this creature. So as time went on and our ideas became more and more sophisticated, the idea that there's something like us that is actually why we're here began to develop. And maybe it started very simply. Maybe it started with a single tribesman who was wandering around looking for something to eat, and something fell on his head. And he looked around and he didn't see anyone. He didn't see any animals. He knew that people or animals can throw rocks, but he didn't see any person. He didn't see any animals. And so he concluded, looking straight up, that it came from the sky. And the sky never throws rocks. Only people do. So it seemed like there was somebody up there throwing rocks at him. And he came back to his tribe and he told them about this person in the sky throwing down rocks. Lightning comes from the gods. Thunder comes from the gods. Gods evolved with humanity. Earlier gods having more human-like qualities than later gods, and other gods taking different forms depending on what culture developed those gods. Eastern gods different than Western gods over time. These are ideas that we humans came up with. We invented them, we developed them through time, and we told each other about them to try to make sense of why we were here, what we were supposed to do, and how the world worked. Origin stories became almost common around the world. Where did we come from? How did we get here? Where are we going? Stories, fantastical in nature, played a pivotal role in early and later humanity and still do. We love a good story. At some point, the God stories were so powerful and so compelling that more and more elaborate systems formed around them until you had what we would call religion. And religions were extraordinarily powerful because they held the keys to the answers to why you were here, where you were going, and what was going to happen when you got there. Live by our system, and you'll get the good stuff. Don't live by our system, you'll get the bad stuff. Every religion had a different sort of root to it. Every religion had its own unique take on it, but those in power would spread their religion of choice to those that they conquered, snuffing out whatever religion was there and replacing it with their own. You can see this in the early religions in Rome. You can see this in the later religions with Christianity and the various conquests thereof. Puritans, so called, sending out people to missionary to the non-Christians. In fact, declaring a tribe as unchristian would grant you easy access to declare war. And so many Spaniards who saw this as an exploit would bring along some missionary who would try to preach at the natives. And of course, the natives had no idea what they were talking about, and they would reject it, and then they would be called heretics, and then they could go to war with them because they were not civilized beings. So Christianity spread, wiping out a lot of the earlier religions around in Mexico and other places. And so the tale goes with almost every religion around the world as power and politics converge and intertwine. And eventually the Catholic Church's power was broken as the print made it easier and easier for the normal layman to access the words of the Bible and could decide for themselves how to do right by their God. So, we can understand the origins of gods. We can look back at history and see gods evolving to different formats throughout different times and throughout different cultures. Yet, people still can know that intellectually, yet believe that there's a God on some other level. They say, well, it's a spiritual sense. There's this feeling about that there's this thing that we call God, and okay, maybe it's not that particular God, but it's brushing up against the idea of it. Maybe if we combined all the different religions, we'll get to an actual God, or maybe it's something that we should be skeptical of, because if it is made by humans, and it was made by humans, then maybe that's all it is. But if you give that argument to a person that believes, and they happen to know some logic, they might retort quite fairly that is the genetic fallacy. What's the genetic fallacy? Thanks for asking. The genetic fallacy is when you say, here's where the thing came from. In this case, humans made up God. Therefore, God is made up. Well, it's just because we identified that humans made it up doesn't mean that it's made up. Well, but yes, kind of. Wait, what? Yes, it does. So that's kind of weird. How do we address that? How do we deal with that? Let's look at it a little bit closer. The genetic fallacy, also known as the fallacy of origins or fallacy of virtue, it's a fallacy of irrelevance. It's based solely on someone or something's history, origin, or source rather than its current meaning or context, overlooking any difference to be found in the present situation, typically transferring the positive or negative esteem from the earlier context. In other words, a claim is ignored in favor of attacking or championing its source. So the fallacy therefore fails to assess the claims on its merit, etc., etc. Okay, so this has been used and can be used to say, well, just because we know that the origin of this thing is the human mind, doesn't mean that it's not also actually real. So what? We invented goblins and ogres and dragons. We know that, but that doesn't mean they're not really real. But they're really not real here on the planet Earth. How can I make such a grandiose claim? Well, by asking you, what evidence would you expect to find if there are no goblins, ogres, or dragons here on the planet Earth? What evidence would you find if there are none of those things? And you have to think about that. What evidence would you expect to find if the murder didn't take place? What evidence would you expect to find if there was no crime committed? What evidence would you expect to find if the event didn't happen? If you can answer that question honestly, you can begin, perhaps, to turn a page, if you will, in your way of thinking. From a mindset of rigorous tradition, rigorous religious, fundamental outlook to what they call a more open or free mind, where you're able and willing to challenge whatever it is you hold most dear. But it might take time. It's not going to be instant, nor should it be. Converting to a belief often happens for any number of reasons, but really it doesn't happen in that moment. It happens long before that one moment. Just like a deconversion doesn't just happen in that moment. There's things that lead up to that moment. And so the story of a conversion or a deconversion isn't all of the story usually, but it's the most interesting part. It's the part where you realized the thing. Isn't it interesting that in religion, well, in the religion I know of at any rate, I can't really speak to all religions, but in my religion, you would go up and you would say, yes, I believe this thing. You would declare it in front of people. Why did you need to do that? Why did it matter that I believed in God in this public way? Why would it matter to this individual who said I needed to believe in God? It's a very social explanation for this need that we have. You want me to be on your side. You want me to be in your group. We want to be around those that are kind of like us to some degree, because what's different scares us, and what scares us to our very foundation is being told that the thing that we've come to rely on as a foundation in our brain might all be made up by other humans. So why should we be skeptical of it then if it's such a powerful force? For the same reasons that you are, I would hope, skeptical of goblins, ogres, and dragons, could you also be skeptical of God? You might say, well, I could be, but I can't. My brain won't let me do it. I tried just now, and it didn't work. Now, of course I could say, try harder, but that wouldn't be very fair. And beyond that, I don't really want people to try to not believe. I want them to arrive at that conclusion through their own journey. Unlike the religious, I don't want to try to deconvert people actively. Rather, I want to give people reasons that they should maybe consider being skeptical. We're skeptical of many, many things, and that's a good thing. People can lie and people can be wrong. So why would we trust other humans when they say that there's a God? And by the way, that God happens to be in this book. And by the way, that book is part of the religion that I happen to be a part of. Well, of course you're going to say that. You're part of that team. You're part of that group. Why wouldn't you say that? But maybe there's an actual God. Maybe. But why think that there is without some sort of actual evidence that there is? Not an argument, but the same sort of evidence that we have for everything else. Now, of course, some have said, well, you can't see dark matter. Can't test it. Well, that's true. That's hasn't been quantified quite yet. It might not even be a thing. It's an idea. I don't think it's reached theory status, as far as I know. Maybe it has. But there are certain things that it has to do to be there as a theory status. Can God fit into a theory status? As an explanation for all the things, having explained where God came from in the first place, which is us as we developed as a human race, can we then say, well, maybe that explanation happens to maybe be true, and maybe I've got at least a piece of the actual God that I believe in, and maybe that matters somehow because why again? Why does it matter that I believe this? What does God, if it exists at all, need with my belief? Why would it care what I think or feel? Isn't it God? Why would it, wouldn't it be above that? Maybe we are the God. We are the goblin, the ogre, the dragon. We are the inventor and the invention in that sense. We are the ones who decide to do or not to do something. We are the ones that want or don't want things. We hope for the best and fear for the worst. And well, but then what happens to our ability to wish for good? When I say good luck, well, there's no such thing as luck. So what am I saying then? What purpose is there to my utterance of good luck? Maybe it might make them feel good, but who cares? It's not real. But we do that sort of weirdness to each other. We say things we know technically aren't really true. And who knows why we do any of that? But to be skeptical of the goblins, the ogres, the dragons, is to also be open to the possibility that, yeah, maybe they're all made up. In fact, they are made up. But also, maybe that doesn't matter. Because the ideas that we extract from that can still be useful, even if we don't believe that they're actually real. And the ideas of gods, even though they're made up, can still be useful. But we have to figure out a way to not rely on our belief, but instead find a better, more robust thing than just belief? What would that be and what would that look like? And that's the struggle, perhaps, that scares some away from skepticism. And I wish I had the answers for that. But unlike some religious people, I won't pretend to have all the answers. But I do have many questions. And hopefully, this compelled you to ask some as well. At the end of the day, we can all at least agree on one simple truth, though, that lobsters exist.